morning, everyone. COVID-19 and the effects this is having on the economy and provincial, federal relations and just everything around the world. This has taken over pretty much everything, all of the news. And here's Jason Kenney talking about the government's inaction on airports and what he's doing to stem that flow. And also, I mean, we're going to be Alberta's heavy today, or at the beginning anyway. We're going to look at 25% unemployment potentially. But first, here's Jason Kenney.
Number 3, strong border screening. I believe it was a mistake for Canada to wait so long to close our borders, especially from countries with high levels of infection. While Alberta doesn't control who can fly here, we will deploy a much more rigorous approach than the federal government has in screening and quarantining international arrivals.
I wish Doug Ford would do something like that. I wish Doug Ford would be much more active on the airport side of things. Doug Ford is doing a lot, and we're going to look at that in a minute as well. I've said on Twitter, and I'll say again here, I think the premiers are stepping up where the prime minister is hiding. How many days in isolation is he at now? 25, 26? How many? Why? Isn't his wife recovered? And does he live with his wife? I thought she was at the cottage, which you're not supposed to go to if you're in Ontario now anyway, right? Weird, isn't it? Anyway, moving on. CBC Kenney warns Alberta headed for 25% unemployment. Alberta is on track to hit a staggering 25% unemployment rate as businesses continue to shed jobs amid the COVID-19 pandemic, coupled with historically low oil prices, Premier Jason Kenney said Tuesday. Quote, the shutdown in much of our economy is having a devastating impact, Kenney said to attendees of an online energy conference Tuesday morning. Based on some polling that we've done and some analysis, I fully expect unemployment in Alberta to be at least 25%, at least 500,000 unemployed Albertans. If that happens, it would mark the highest unemployment rate in any Canadian province since modern records began. On a seasonally adjusted basis, the highest rate recorded by Statistics Canada since 1976 was in Newfoundland and Labrador, which hit 22.7% unemployment in September 1984. Alberta's highest unemployment rate to date was 12.4%, also in September 1984. I wonder why they chose 1976. Is 1976 when modern Canadian records began, or did we have records through the First and Second World War? I couldn't imagine not keeping records through the First World War, but I mean maybe not. Odd to pick that year though. I wonder what the unemployment was like in 1974. Right? Why 1976? So arbitrary. Anyway, but maybe not arbitrary, right? I don't know. So it could be chosen 1976 for a very specific reason, right? Here's the dates. They're all after 1976, and the highest rate ever recorded, right? If you're looking at after 1976. Back to the article. This will be the most challenging period for the province's economy in relative terms since the Great Depression, Kenney told the group convened by the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, CAP. Kenney says his government is taking action to try to help companies in Alberta navigate the current economic storm. His UCP government has announced $12 billion in fiscal measures, he said, either through direct investment or deferrals. Credit backstop sought. Kenney said Alberta is working with federal government and seeking some form of credit backstop that would allow banks to continue to extend credit to distressed companies. Our estimate is that the quantum required in terms of liquidity for the sector now is in the range of 20 to 30 billion, he said. I have underscored repeatedly that this country cannot allow our largest industry subsector to fail or to be permanently impaired. And there's more to that story, but I'll leave it there. We'll get to the hydroxychloroquine. Got it right now. But isn't that just the impact on Alberta alone, when you look at the inaction on the federal government, the fact that the province has to step in to spend money and mitigate measures at the airport, and they're looking at helping businesses and the oil sector stay afloat while oil is at record lows and nobody's allowed to go to work. It's a perfect storm of economic disaster, right? And not to mention the wider implications. I mean, the pressure from the United States producing their own oil, the pressure from South American governments, Maduro having his oil being controlled by China. There's a lot of stuff going on with regards to oil in the world, not to mention China and Russia and excuse me, Saudi Arabia and Russia having an oil war. And sure, Trump made a phone call to Putin, and the gas prices rose, the oil prices rose. But at the same time, I mean, the pressure on the world is not just a phone call from Trump away to fix, right? It just doesn't work like that, unfortunately. But here we are in an economic perfect storm with an underline of everybody stay home or we're going to fine you, right? Isn't that interesting? Isn't it? I've said before, you don't really want to live in interesting times because, well, interesting times look like this, right? Like we're in uncharted water. We don't know what's going to happen if the economy hits 25% unemployed, right? How does that look? If the government can't take care of that, is the government useful? Will the rest of the population continue to pay their taxes if the 25% are not able to be cared for properly, right? And because if the underpinnings of society, which is our social safety net, fall apart, which is what we pay taxes for, which is what and Trudeau is sending tax money outside of Canada, right? If the social underpinnings like our social safety net start to fall apart, then you start to lose faith in your system. And that's a problem, right? That's problematic. So they can see this storm coming. They're looking for credit backstops. They're looking to make sure that there's liquidity in the markets. They're making sure that people can access money. But when you see that every other oil and gas project has been shut down in one way or another by these liberals, where's the glimmer of hope, right? And if there's no money coming in from that sector is bolstered Alberta for a very long time. If there's no money coming in from that sector and nothing to replace it, well, nobody's buying houses, nobody's going out to restaurants, nobody's buying expensive houses, nobody's trading up, you know what I mean? Nobody's moving into a bigger house or anything to that effect because everybody's in survival mode. It's problematic. The impacts on the economy cannot be understated. Whether it's real or not, this thing is happening, right? And it's happened. And the impacts are far-reaching. And how do you solve this? This is a genie that has been let out of the bottle that is, outside of our control now, right? And the half measures that our federal government is putting into place. I mean, even today, it's like Trudeau, and I was going to get to this a bit later, but Trudeau's got a daily presser that I haven't covered because moister, come on, or moistly, but he's got this daily presser, and I think it's wearing thin because there's no plan, right? The daily presser is telling us things that should have been done weeks ago, and there's no plan to get things rolling again. Trump keeps talking about when the economy is going to come back, when people are going to go back to work. That's leadership, right? Mr. Ford talks about trying to get back to normal. Sometimes I don't have more examples of that, but I'm busy, so what are you going to do? But there are examples of people pointing to when we get out of this is how we're going to behave. And from what I've seen, Trudeau is just announcing. It feels like an election campaign from his porch that the media is cheering gleefully for. It's just really weird, right? Trudeau expected to announce increased wage subsidies. The federal government is expected to announce enhanced wage subsidies. Alberta unemployment set to skyrocket. Blah blah blah. Okay, so the impact is real and being felt by everyone. And the government's early inaction is more underlined than ever, if you ask me. Okay, Maxime Bernier is tweeting, I have no idea if hydroxychloroquine is effective or not as a treatment, but I just don't trust flip-flopping Tam and Haydu. Let's hope these clinical trials will give us clear answers soon. And there's a McGill University one, but I wanted to show you this to finish off our Alberta, round out our Alberta beginning of the show, which has now lasted almost 10 minutes. Anyway, Alberta Health Services is recommending hydroxychloroquine. It says hydroxychloroquine is a benefit. Hold on, let me get this queued up. And thus, the two agents that are currently felt to offer the best ratio of possible benefit to harm are lopinar, and that's an early 12 days infection, and hydroxychloroquine plaquenil. Not time-restricted, see below for details. So that's interesting, right? Interesting. Here's McGill. If you're interested in joining a clinical trial, McGill University researchers looking for patients to test hydroxychloroquine on as treatment for COVID-19. Wouldn't you think that, like, from everything we've been told, that there would be enough sick people you don't have to, like, have CTV News put your call to arms out for you? Isn't that like you'd go to any hospital and like throw throw a cotton ball and you'd find a patient, right? Like, McGill University researchers are asking eligible Quebecers to participate in a clinical trial that will test hydroxychloroquine's ability to fight the COVID-19 virus. In the past, the drug has been used to prevent and treat malaria. It's also often prescribed for other reasons. However, it is used as a treatment for COVID-19 while recommended. However, its use as a treatment for COVID-19, while recommended by some public figures such as U.S. President Donald Trump, has been a topic of great controversy in recent weeks. You know what else has been a topic of controversy? Wearing masks to prevent the spread of viruses, which is not controversial, which is recommended by the CDC, not the CDC, the WHO last year in its 2019 guidelines. Wear a mask if you're in a pandemic, to prevent spread to other people, right? Not to protect yourself, but to protect spread from other people. So the fact that our Canadian media is unironically saying that this is controversial, get bent, guys. Come on. Back to this. It found almost a second life, it being hydroxychloroquine, found almost a second life as an anti-inflammatory agent used in diseases like rheumatoid arthritis or lupus, said Dr. Todd Lee, one of the researchers leading the trial at the Research Institute of the McGill University Health Center. The thought here in why hydroxychloroquine garnered a lot of attention for COVID-19, Lee said, is earlier evidence dating back to the SARS outbreak that suggests that chloroquine, which hydroxychloroquine is closely related cousin, may be infectious. I'm saying that terribly wrong. At killing the virus or preventing the inflammation associated with infection. I scroll down. Lee said the sooner they find participants for the trial, the sooner they'll start to see results. Our first look at the data pooled with the U.S. data for prevention is happening this week, and there are some pre-specified rules for what would constitute a major success that would require the study to stop, he said. We'll get our first look of that this week. To be eligible, participants must have started showing symptoms or have been exposed to the virus in the past 3 to 4 days. They'll be given either the drug or a placebo over 5 days, and then they'll be required to fill in online surveys. Please, people can look into signing up here. You can check out that link. That's not in the description, but you can have a look. It's the link to the news stories in the description. Moving on, defective masks were sent to Toronto long-term care home while residents died of COVID-19. I wonder where those masks were produced. No, I don't. I knew before I read the article, and so do you. Back to this. Defective masks are being recalled by the City of Toronto, were sent to at least 3 long-term care homes, including one dealing with a deadly COVID-19 outbreak. The city said on Tuesday it was recalling hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of surgical masks after reports of ripping and tearing in the product. The City of Toronto discovered yesterday that a recently purchased order of more than $200,000 worth of surgical masks did not meet the specifications that the city requires for such masks and took immediate action recalling these masks, the city said in a news release. The order of 4,000 boxes containing 50 masks per box was received on March 28th, of which 62,500 masks, or 1,252 boxes, were distributed to the city's long-term care homes. After reports of ripping and tearing, further inspection of the masks determined that the masks ordered did not meet the city's standard and specifications, the city said, adding that Toronto's occupational health and safety staff have been contacted. The city says the masks were manufactured in China, are being returned, and the vendor is committed to a full refund. Yay! Quote, we know the issue of fraudulent and poor quality personal protective equipment is an issue around the world, Toronto Fire Chief Matthew Pegg told reporters at a news conference Tuesday afternoon. We've been fortunate, if you will, that to my knowledge, this is the only shipment of personal protective equipment for which we've had concerns to date. Wonderful. Here's a much better source. Ford touts Ontario-made N96 masks similar to the N95 gear used to fight COVID-19 and held up by Trump. In a bid to avert shortages of foreign-made medical gear due to COVID-19, Premier Doug Ford is praising Ontario manufacturers that are stepping into the breach. Ford on Tuesday touted a new locally made N96 respirator mask that is as good or better than 3M's N95 masks in such high demand due to the pandemic. Today I visited Woodbridge's manufacturing facility in Vaughan to receive the province's first batch of personal protective equipment produced right here in Ontario, the Premier said. Woodbridge, together with Automotive Parts Manufacturer Association, has been working at an unprecedented pace to retool their factories and get the required approvals to manufacture masks for our frontline workers, said Ford. I was thrilled to see firsthand the fruition of their hard work and look forward to them ramping up production in the coming days to meet the demand of Ontario and soon other parts of the country, he said. As for the faces As the world faces a global shortage of medical equipment, Ontario-based companies have stepped up in a big way in order to ensure our frontline workers are protected against COVID-19. Okay, so that's good news. Here's a reminder. On March 25th, Bill Morneau was asked when the Canadian energy sector could expect help from the Liberals. He said, "I'm not talking about weeks, I'm talking about hours, potentially days." 13 days later, nothing. And no follow-up update. Can't delay us away. And this is an MP. This is a Conservative Party MP, Shannon Stubbs. And I talked about this already. Here's supply management. I think this is just an interesting way to kind of cap off this story. I'm already at 15 minutes. I could probably just not do this story, but it's really weird. I mean, not weird. This is how our supply management works. I'm going to do this story. Supply management is bad policy in good times. It's terrible policy in bad times. This is published yesterday, April 7th. Today is April 8th. My wife grew up in a small farm near Rockyford, Alberta. Not my wife, the author's wife. Her father had a small dairy operation with a dozen cows. Cream would be separated from the product, produced milk, and sold. Remaining milk would be used to feed the household and supplement livestock feed. There would still be a large amount of milk remaining every day as the family could only consume so much. That milk would be poured into a nearby ditch. Why would a farm family with limited income pour away a product with which other families have to pay dearly to purchase? They had to. It was and still is the law. The family farm only had a government-issued quota to sell cream. It would have been illegal for my wife's father to sell a single drop of milk. Welcome to Canada's supply management system. And here is published by the BBC on April 6th, Coronavirus, Why Canada's Dairy Farmers Are Dumping Milk. You didn't see this in the CBC, did you? I didn't either. Dairy Farmers of Ontario has told farmers to get rid of raw milk to keep prices stable and prevent oversupply. The industry group says demand has crashed as restaurants and other bulk buyers shuttered due to COVID-19. Some 500 farms have been asked to dump 5 million litres a week, according to a trade report. The policy is a volte-face from last week when Dairy Farms of Ontario, which oversees nearly a third of Canada's dairies, had asked farmers to increase production amid concerns about a shortage. In its 55-year history, Dairy Farmers of Ontario had only once before had to ask producers to dispose of raw milk. Cheryl Smith, the association's CEO, told BBC. Canadian dairy is produced under what is known as supply management system, which strictly controls production quotas and imports to support prices. Dairy Farmers of Ontario is hoping that by spilling fresh milk, the supply will balance out and prices will remain stable. The group has not confirmed how much milk they are asking farmers to dump, but says it will be done on a select and rotating basis. Isn't that wild? Like, welcome to potentially milk shortages and all sorts of other stuff. But dump that milk. We don't want the prices to crash or anything. For the people who are unemployed. Just seems odd, right? The government's reaction is consistently strange. Doug Ford showing leadership. Jason Kenney's showing leadership. And we've got Justin Trudeau hiding in his home, self-isolating for 20-odd days over what should be a 14-day isolation. And Boris Johnson's still doing his job from a hospital bed. Right? I mean, is it out of sorts to be upset with the leadership of this country because it seems to not have a direction or leadership or any pathway out of a shutdown for its economy? Nor does it have any real solutions to the problem of 25% unemployment. Could that be heading higher? Well, yeah, if the 25% people who are unemployed stop buying things from the other associated jobs, what happened to the restaurants will happen. Like what happened to the restaurants in Alberta will happen to retail shops further out if nobody has any money. So there's no plan as far as I've seen. Nobody's floating any ideas. If you've seen them floating ideas, please share in the comments. I'm very interested. What's Canada's plan? What's Ontario's plan? Manufacture PPE for the rest of the world? Right? Maybe. I mean, couldn't hurt, right? Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com and CanadaReport.co and have a wonderful, wonderful day. That wasn't very smooth.